Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the Make or Break show. We're hanging out with Zac from Zac Builds today. Calling in, you're in Canada, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, Toronto, Canada.
Toronto. I feel like there's tons of YouTubers now in Toronto, and all of you guys are making really cool stuff. And all of you guys have trucks, it feels like.
Yeah. You know, I think the truck thing is definitely big. There's a lot of contractors here. It's a very rapidly growing city, so yeah.
That's fun.
I definitely feel at home driving around in my truck. I'm part of the gang out there.
Yeah. Well, sweet man. Well, I'm excited to chat with you all about your background. And you got a background in contracting, and then you make some pretty crazy furniture as well. But I'd love to kind of start at the beginning. And so, did I see your family is in the contracting business? Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. So basically, I've been in the contracting business since I've been old enough to walk. So my dad started the company, I think. My dad started the company with my grandfather probably like 6 months before I was born.
Okay.
And then, so basically, ever since I've been able to walk, I've been going to work with my dad. I've been cleaning up job sites. You know, I got a little older. He put a drill in my hand, and I've kind of just grown up with it.
Yeah. So what type of contracting?
So it's mostly residential. We do a little bit of commercial here and there, some restaurants and some shops, but it's mostly we're going in and we're building people's dream homes. So it's usually full gut renos or knocking down the old structure and building a new house in its place.
Yeah. So is that your day job now then?
Yeah.
That's cool. Is it weird? Because we've had a few people that are like in family businesses. Like, is that ever strange, or just since you've done it for so long, it just it is what it is?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, there's always going to be conflicts in long-term relationships, and like me, so now it's just me and my dad. We have a couple employees, but there's a little bit of friction. But like, honestly, I love working with my dad. He's a great guy, and everything I know today, I learned from him. So when it comes to how to do things, there's not really much deviation in how we do things. We're very simpatico when we're working together. So yeah, it's a great experience.
That's cool. So that is how you got to working with tools and started with construction. Did you kind of pick it up immediately? Like even maybe if you didn't have the background with your parents, do you think that would have been something you would have like gravitated to anyway?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. It's kind of hard to say, right? Because, my parents always encouraged me from a very young age to build things. So, I would help my dad at the work site, and we'd take everything back to his shop. And then I would be, while he was putting the tools away, I'm playing with all the scrap wood. And I used to glue up these, like, I called them airplanes, but they probably barely even resembled airplanes. I was 5 years old. So yeah, like, it's really hard for me to separate that out. I do have I was always drawn to Lego. I was always like Connects, all these toys and stuff where you build things. I was always extremely drawn to. But it's hard to separate that out from my life experience.
Right. Yeah. What type of Lego stuff would you build?
So I would say I definitely do have an intuitive sense of building, and I've always really been drawn to it. So I'd like to think that if it wasn't for the family business, I would still be into it, but it's hard to know.
Yeah. So what about Lego stuff were you into making?
Oh, just all sorts of stuff. That was like top of my Christmas lists every year.
Yeah.
It was like whatever the latest Lego project was. But I was kind of into it. So I think I got into it before they started doing the really cool stuff. Like, I remember being like 13, 14 and seeing them come out with all these electronic, all these electronic Legos and the motors and stuff like that. But at that point, I was like a little bit too old for it. I was, kind of more into the video games than your typical 13, 14-year-old stuff at that point.
Yeah. I think we're close-ish to the same age, in 30s, somewhere like.
Yeah. So I'm 88. I was born in.
Oh, 88. Okay, I thought you said your age was 88. I'm like,
no,
really good for 88. So yeah, I was 86. And so yeah, when the especially like the robotic stuff started coming out, I'm like, what? Like I totally missed out on all of this stuff. This stuff is really crazy.
I had classic Lego. Like the coolest thing I probably had was like some like the Star Wars X-wing or something like that. But yeah, I didn't really get into any of that like really advanced electronic stuff. And then they had like integrated circuits and stuff later on. It's a good time now to be into Lego.
Cool. It's super cool.
Yeah.
So out of high school then, or out of I guess normal schooling, did you go straight into doing contract work?
No, so I actually went to university. This is a thing that kind of surprises a lot of people when they talk to me a little bit, is that I actually went to school for economics and finance. Okay. And I kind of thought, like I would go into this, white collar world of banking and, maybe work for a hedge fund or something like that. But the more I did it, I don't know, like I was decently good at it, and that kind of drew me along that path. Like I always, when you excel at something, you tend to kind of go down that road a little bit. Right. But just looking at all my friends immediately after graduating and the jobs they were doing, none of them really enjoyed it. They were ridiculously long hours. So I kind of made a choice that I was going to go back into the family business after I graduated. And I was going to try and, see how far I could take the family business and see, if I could take those business skills that I learned in school and apply them to the family business as opposed to going to work for a bank or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did that look like? What type of skills? Like, was it more on the business side of things that?
Yeah. I was more on the business side. I don't know how the business schools in the States are structured, but here you basically do 2 years of general business school. So there's marketing, there's accounting, there's finance, there's economics. You do a little bit of everything, and then you specialize after that. So I took a lot of those, marketing and business development skills and tried to apply those to the family business.
Oh, cool.
That's
cool. Yeah. So on the fine furniture side, then did you just start building furniture just because you had access to all the tools? But because it always feels like contractors and then like woodworkers, quote unquote woodworkers, are like a little bit different breeds. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I never intended. So the furniture stuff is all extremely new for me. I've only been doing it for like the last 2 or 3 years, maybe. And it grew out of a desire I wanted to teach people the principles of building. Like I learned a lot of stuff working on houses over the years, and I wanted to find a way to demonstrate that to people. I don't know what it's like where you live, but here in Toronto, it's ridiculously expensive to own a house. So basically, like your average house starts at north of $1 million. So most people our age don't really own their own homes, but I still had this desire. I was like, I want to get on social media. I want to teach people these principles and these things I know about building. So I was like, well, I have access to a workshop. I have access to all these tools. And I was like, what can I do where I can still kind of teach people things? And I was like, well, why don't I try my hand at making some furniture? And it's just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. And did I see, so when you started to build furniture, your intent was I'm going to share this.
Yes.
And okay, so it wasn't, you weren't just making furniture for yourself. You knew this was stuff you wanted to document.
It's 100%. I made maybe 1 or 2 things for myself before I started sharing stuff online. So basically, if you go back and you look at the beginning of my Instagram page, you're basically looking at the beginning of me woodworking.
Yeah. And so on your blog or on your website, it looks like the first project was 2017. So is that about right? So about 3 years now?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
That's crazy. So did you want it to be did you just want to share it, or did you see this could be a business opportunity down the road too?
I mean, I think everybody, when they share something online, they have a little bit of a dream of becoming the social media star. So from the start, it was very intentional for me. And I still do want to make this a business. I would love to just be able to go to the shop every day, make whatever I want, and teach people about building. And so for that to be my full-time job. And it's, it's kind of getting there. It's, it's a slow build, but it's definitely looks like something that's a possibility in the future.
Yeah. When did you start noticing there was a larger, especially woodworking community out there? Was that something you knew already existed, or did you kind of come across it as you started sharing?
Yeah, I only came across it as I started sharing. For a while, I was just, I was kind of building the stuff and I was posting it. My friends, people in my immediate social circle would see it and they were like, oh, this is cool. But I realized I kind of have to get out there and be a part of this community if I want to succeed and grow in it. So I spent a lot of time, and I still do find a lot of time, trying to find websites and forums and all these woodworking communities out there where I can connect with people and join the discussion. So it was I wasn't part of the community at all, and searching for it was definitely a big part of the early learning curve for me.
Yeah. Who were some of the communities, or who were some of the people that you first kind of came across?
Reddit was one of the very first ones. Yeah, I started getting involved with the DIY community there, and that's where I really started to grow. At first was just, I would share a project I did, I get a lot of responses on it, and I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe here's a way that I can reach new people. So I focused a lot of energy early on Reddit, and then from that, Instagram was kind of developing at the same time, and Reddit's kind of interesting because you're basically interacting with hundreds of thousands of people, and you never really know any of them personally. And then I started growing on Instagram, and then that's where I started to make like people that I feel like are like my real life friends. Like I have relationships I've developed on Instagram that I feel just as close to as any of my real life friends.
Yeah. And Instagram isn't nearly as you're rolling the dice on Reddit. You're like, am I just going to get destroyed by comments on this guy?
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to have any, you don't want to be doing anything unsafe at all in any of your photos. You don't want to do anything that's not best practices because somebody will do their best to tear you down.
Yeah. And even like the sharing of stuff, like especially if you're trying to drive traffic to somewhere off of Reddit, people are like pretty angry if you try to do that. But
yeah, definitely. You have to be very careful about not making it like, you don't want to lead with the very first thing being like, hey, check out my Instagram, or hey, check out my YouTube channel. It's got to be, if you like this and you want to see more, you maybe want to check this out, and then you put that down at the bottom or something so nobody gets angry.
Yeah. So I was looking, so your Instagram, I know you've got several thousand followers. You're up like over 17,000. Did I see that? Something? Yeah. This latest project has actually been really good for me. I've added 500 in the past weekend, which is that's
crazy.
What I was going to ask, because I noticed the likes on it, and I was like, man, he's getting a ton. But the project is super cool. So did you always go into your projects wanting to create something that's pretty not crazy looking, but like really unique and really like eye catching to get people's attention, or was it just something you wanted to make?
Well, okay, so yeah, it was both. I've always. I'm not a very patient person. So I know I don't have, when I look at all these guys doing very fancy, mortise work and tenons, and it's all very intricate, and I can tell they've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours to build something. I knew that kind of wasn't for me. I wanted my projects to be kind of artistic, right? So I knew I wasn't going to maybe capture people's attention because my technical details were the best, but I thought I could approach it from a creative way and maybe catch people's attention because I could create something that looked cool.
Yeah.
So
taking your most recent project, because the video just went up on Friday. Is it the Pixelated end table? Is that the?
Yeah, exactly.
Where did the idea for that come from? Is it a certain technique you want to use, or is it a need that you have? Where does all of that kind of work, your design process? Yeah,
so it's kind of a cross between needs and what I want to do let's take this this project, the Pixelated end table, as an example. I had a need. I had somewhat of a need for a place to rest my coffee while I'm sitting in my armchair in the morning, right? But then I also had this desire to see if I could create. I've been working with the kind of gluing up wood for a while now, and I wanted to see if I could take that into a three-dimensional. I've been doing it a lot with tabletops and desktops and stuff like that, and I wanted to see if I could glue something in 3 dimensions and have glue just be the structure of the whole project. So it was kind of an intersection between that need for an end table and then wanting to experiment and see if I could make something 3D with glue. So that's how a lot of my projects end up kind of coming about. I want to see if I can do something, and then I also have, some sort of vague need for a piece of furniture, and I'll try and merge the two.
Yeah. I haven't really seen the 3D approach. 'Cause I mean, like you said, definitely the butcher block, just doing a bunch of ships. A ton of people have done that, but taking it to the next dimension looks really cool. And then it isn't just one solid block, just the cool, just different levels, different. It's super cool looking.
Yeah, thank you, man. It turned out better than I ever expected. It was a lot of fun to make, and I think I'll continue to experiment in that space for a little bit.
So how long did that take you to make?
That's a good question. I think I had 4 days in the shop making it, and then another day at home shooting photos of it, shooting video of it. So whenever you're documenting a build, it basically doubles the amount of time that it takes to do something. So I think it took 4 days to actually build it, but I probably, if I wanted to do another one and I wasn't filming it all, I could do it in a couple days.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this might be hard for you to answer just because you're in it, but maybe you see other people that build online. But since you have, like, you've got the professional experience on the contractor side, like, do you think you approach kind of the YouTube-ish builds differently, like whether it's a process or just like a workflow, or do you think it's kind of the same regardless?
That's a good question. I definitely have. I'm pretty regimented. Like when I do a project, I'll sit down. I'll do the project, and then I have this phase where I sit down and I edit it, and I'm breaking pieces of, some pieces of it are for the blog, some pieces of it are for Instagram. So I've definitely developed a system that I stick to. But again, that's not really how it was when I first started. When I first started, it was just kind of taking photos and taking videos kind of haphazardly, and it's kind of formed over time. So I don't know. I don't think my professional background has that much to do with it.
Got it.
I think it's just I've kind of had to create a system to keep myself sane while I make these things.
Yeah. So you mentioned pictures or photos and videos several times now, and that's something that definitely stands out, are just the photos, and even like the photos from the shop. Like when I look at some of your product reviews, and like it's just lit, super cool. The shot, everything's dark, but then you have it like looks sweet. Where did that come from? Like, is there another hobby you've had, or is it just something you've built up?
It's kind of it was around the same time in my life I really started to pick up photography and videography. I think the first thing was I got a drone, just kind of like one of those, DJI Phantoms. They were like really cool, and I was like, I just love the concept of it, and I wanted to, I don't know, I just wanted to find a use for it. So I started, I bought one, I kind of started taking photos, and I realized I really enjoyed the photography and the videography aspect, but I didn't have a subject. So then, I started building stuff. I started thinking about social media. I was like, well, what about if I married the two? What about if I married building things and photography and videography? So that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah. For people that want to step up especially their photo game, because I feel like you're, and I know you've done some like pretty good tips online. Like, any suggestions you have for people like with minimal equipment, like some things they could do just to keep in mind to have stuff that looks a little bit cooler?
Yeah, I think so. If you have minimal equipment but you want to take nice photos and videos, spend a lot of time studying lighting and composition. So there's all sorts of cool tricks you can do with how you arrange things. You find out about the rule of thirds, and then you find about like obscuring part of the frame with something out of focus, like an out of focus element. And there's all these little tricks you can do, and they don't cost you anything. Like, that's all it takes is like a little bit of intentionality when you go to take your photos, and then lighting can completely transform like the setting and the look of a photo. Like, you'll notice right now I have there's a big bright window next to me, and that's kind of intentional because I want it to be side lit when we did this interview. So and those things don't cost you anything other than go watch a couple of YouTube videos and hear somebody talk about it, and then go and try and repeat it. And that's basically, I've had no formal education in videography or photography. It's just been watching YouTube videos and trying to emulate the things I see.
Yeah, and that's it. And for people that don't know, you didn't know this was going to be a video at first. So just the fact that you're able to like set up like, oh, here's my light is a window, and you can do that so quickly. That's something that's pretty helpful. Yeah,
and it's like that's just something now it's kind of second nature, but it didn't used to be. It started out, you had to be very intentional about it, and that's something I kind of discovered when I was doing all the woodworking projects. Was I operate much better if I think about a premise, or I think about an angle, or I think about a photo I want to capture before I try and go out and capture it. I kind of have a plan, and I'm thinking ahead about it, as opposed to trying to capture random moments that happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really taking photos, I'm making photos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something that really kind of changed the way I look at photography and videography. And again, anybody can do that. It's, being intentional about what you're creating is being a big game changer for me.
So when you're going into a build, like, do you know at these points, I want to take a picture of this? Or is it a mix of like, you get to it and you're like, oh, this could be a really cool shot, I should get a picture of this before I move on?
Yeah, so, hold on, I'm just getting a pop-up in front of my screen here. Okay, so when I'm going into a project, sometimes, with my first YouTube video, I kind of storyboarded the whole thing. Not actually storyboarded, but I had bullet points of things I wanted to say, and then I kind of thought about what angle I wanted to capture in that. So yeah, I really, it's kind of all about intentionality.
Yeah.
Because I find if I try and capture things in the moment, I'm not very good at it. You miss it. Things aren't quite set the way you wanted it to be, and it kind of comes out not looking the way I wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is Zach, or no, not Zach, you're Zach, sorry. Chris in the chat had mentioned that he really likes your videos and your editing is real stylish and cool. Do you have folks that you enjoy watching, or is there like where did that kind of come from, or is that something you've kind of developed? Because I mean, you've only been on YouTube not super long, right?
Oh, I know. I only have like 4 or 5 videos out right now. It's still very early days for me. But what you don't see is there's a lot of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor too, right? There's a lot of like attempts at creating stuff, and I'm like, that's not quite good enough. So you only see me on YouTube when I got to a certain point, and I'm like, okay, now I feel comfortable sharing this with the world. But yeah, so I draw a lot of, I think anybody who's seen one of my videos and seen one of Peter McKinnon's videos knows that I've drawn a lot of inspiration from his stuff. So just that kind of like, you know, these cool angles, and everything's set to music. And I don't know, I want my woodworking videos to kind of look like a music video or something like that. If that makes sense.
It looks super cool. Now, do you know Peter at all? I mean, you guys are in the same. I know Toronto's massive, but
yeah. No, I've never met him. I've met a couple. If anybody knows Peter McKinnon, they might know Matty Kapoya. I've seen him talk a couple times in person. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I'm probably a couple degrees of separation away from him. I know a lot of people in the film industry, but I've never met him.
Got it. Mm-hmm. That's cool. So going back to just your builds, and so you said like you would love if this could be more of, I guess, your full-time job. Like, where do you see this building out, or like, do you have like a bigger plan, or you just want to keep putting out cool stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger plan is to have a bigger YouTube channel, because that's kind of a space where I can run ads and I can get revenue from it, and I can actually focus my attention full time on doing this. Because right now, it's in some ways this whole coronavirus thing has been good for me, because I'm not on job sites anymore. I'm focusing all my time on content creation. But before, I was just doing it on the weekends, or I was doing it if I had an off day. I was kind of using it to fill things. So I kind of feel like I'm wearing a lot of hats, and as a result, my content kind of suffers because I'm not putting everything of myself into it. So I would like to be doing that. I would like to be making things full time, thinking about new ways I can experiment with new materials, and trying new and interesting things.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of leads into a question that Chris had asked, mentioned just the coronavirus stuff. And so he says, I know you've been doing more videos, home improvement. How has that just affected you on like the mental side of things, as well as like, are you trying to put out more content just because you're not on the day job as much?
Yeah. So I'm definitely trying to ramp up my content creation. I actually have 2 videos that I'm like halfway through editing right now that are like about home tips that you can do while people are quarantined at home. But yeah, it's I've been able to really focus myself on doing it, and I think it's been great for my my mental health through all of this, because I have a goal that I can focus on. I have something that I can really dedicate myself to. So for me, it doesn't feel like I'm lost without a job or without my friends to see and stuff like that, because I've been able to just dive headlong into content creation. Also, I have the workshop where I can go and be alone. So technically, I'm still in self-isolation, but I'm like out of the house and doing things. So that's nice too. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about your workshop. Is that like from the contractor world, or is that a completely separate? Okay.
Yeah, so the workshop is actually at my dad's house, because we built it for our contracting company.
Oh, cool.
So he's got a decent chunk of land, and we were like, well, we need somewhere to store all the tools, and I was like, I need somewhere to do my my videos. So we just about a year ago we said, okay, well, let's take the leap. Let's make that. He also enjoys doing a lot of his own projects, so he makes good use of it too. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. We decided to make the jump. We applied all of the things we've learned building other people's houses, and we basically used it as like a time sink. So anytime we had like a slow, like say you're waiting for an inspection on a job site, we would take all the employees over and we would spend like, you know, a day framing up the exterior. And it's like, okay, now let's go back to the job site, work a little bit. Okay, we have a free day. Let's come back and like we'll do the roofing and stuff like that. So yeah. So it was a good way that I could kind of marry my professional life and my, you know, my side hustle.
Yeah. So what's kind of the setup in terms of like tools and everything for people that may haven't seen it?
Sorry, could you say that again? You broke up for a second.
Yeah, sorry. So what's kind of the setup just on the tooling side of things? Like what is it, like a typical kind of woodworker workshop that you've got? Yeah.
So it's like basically like when you first come in, you're looking at the table saw because that's, you know, most materials go through the table saw when you first start. Then you have, it's basically like a big long rectangle. I think it's 39 feet by 16 feet deep. So it's not huge, but it's a lot more than I'm used to. So it's been good. And then you just had 2 big assembly tables and then a bunch of like floating tools on stands and some workbenches down the side. So it's very much your typical woodworker setup.
Cool.
I still haven't added anything fancy. I have a lot of dreams of, you know, 3D printers and CNC mills, but I'm not quite at that point yet.
Yeah, that stuff explodes. I feel like when I got my first CNC and now I'm just like overrun with just random things like robots on gantries on my shop now. But started as a woodworking shop. It's cool. So we've already mentioned the pixelated, the end table, but that design I know you've had in a lot of your other projects. Where did you kind of come across that, and like why do you think you've kind of stuck with it?
So I feel so bad because there is a very specific project that inspired me down this line that I've been doing now for the last like 2 years at least. But I can't find it. So I saw a table that was very similar. It was like, you know, it was like walnut on one side and then it like slowly faded to another type of wood, and it was like, you know, basically what I do. It's like a bunch of thin strips of wood all glued together, and I've been trying for the life of me. Maybe some of your listeners know what I'm talking about, and they can point me out to it. I probably saw it like 5 or 6 years ago, and it just stuck in my head. It was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I made it myself. I wanted to make something like that for myself the first time, and I did it. And then I was like, okay, how can I iterate on this? Like, what are some other logical extensions I can take from this? And people seem to like it. It's part of the reason I keep doing it is because people respond well to it. So it's nice to see that people are happy and appreciate what I make. So,
so is that some of the projects you mentioned that are coming up, and like you're wanting to expand on like the 3D idea of it? Like, are those some of the projects you're trying to do? Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of had the idea to do like a whole coffee table that was like end grain on the top, and then it slowly like falls away at the sides, kind of the same way the pixelated end table does. And I have some other things. I'm also cognizant of the fact that, like, I don't want to make the same thing forever, so I have some other stuff in the can that I'm working on.
Yeah. So I haven't seen the table. I probably have seen it, I just don't remember it. But I definitely have seen kind of like the wall art that's just the strips that maybe they're painted, but they're different designs like that look super cool.
Yeah, and I drew a lot of inspiration early on too from cutting boards I would see people do. Like people do these really crazy like end grain cutting boards and like crazy patterns in it, and I always kind of thought, well, why couldn't you do that bigger? Like I feel like it doesn't need to just be like a 12 by 16 rectangle. It could be a big dining room table or something like that.
Yeah. So going back then to your video and your photography and everything. So you talked about the shop setup, but as far as like what you're shooting with and kind of your gear, I know people always love to hear that kind of stuff too. Like what do you normally use?
So I'm a big fanboy of Sony stuff. So I have a Sony a7 III, which is like that's like basically what I shoot 90% of my photos and my video on. Big hulking camera. It's kind of annoying to move around, but it's not like one of these big shoulder rig cameras either. So it's kind of a nice little middle ground. And then I have a Sony a6100 that I just got recently, which is kind of like my B camera. I set it up if I ever want to have like an alternate point of view, and I'll like roll both of them simultaneously. So when I'm editing, I can cut back and forth between them. I have a GoPro and Insta360 that I use not that often just because I don't really like the colors and stuff that come out of them. It's really hard to do. I don't know if a lot of people I probably don't even notice. It's probably just me being super particular. But like if the colors are off from one scene to another, it really bugs me. So yeah, I tend to stick to just Sony stuff to make it as easy as possible to keep everything looking consistent.
Yeah, so then you have like all the same picture profiles and everything that you can pull in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I shoot on a A7 III II. That's actually what is really recording. You're seeing like a webcam, but like my nicer, I couldn't get it to work with Skype or whatever. But yeah, it's fun, but it's big. You got to move it around, and you're like, I'm so sick of a tripod. Like I want to have this somewhere else. But
I know. You just want to do everything with like a little like gooseneck clamp and something like that. Yeah, I know. And there's always these like weird spots you want to get it, like, oh, like I really want to show me like sanding the inside of this box and the camera doesn't fit, and there's different tools for different jobs, right? It's like just like anything in making, you realize that if there's a camera out there, it probably exists for a reason because somebody was trying to fill a particular need. So there's not really one camera that does everything, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what about the drone? Do you just have that just buzzing at the very top of your shop and just being ridiculous while you're building?
Well, so it's interesting because I had the drone. So I had a DJI Phantom, which was like one of the bigger drones. And then I don't know what it's like where you are, but the laws up here in Canada changed around droning. And then it basically became... And it wasn't very practical for me to keep it. Let's just say that. I would have to go and do a bunch of licensing and phone like aircraft control tower every time I wanted to fly it. I recently got the new DJI drone that's so small it kind of like skirts under the radar of all the new laws. But I haven't really found a way to properly integrate it into my woodworking. I think it's just gonna be more for like establishing shots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you ever see like my shop filmed from outside or me like pulling up in like from like an aerial view or something like that, that's probably what I'll use it for. But inside the shop, I haven't found a practical use for it just yet.
Yeah, the inside stuff it's almost like you just want just like a overhead camera could pretty much do the same thing. But yeah, so that's actually something I've been thinking. That's been kind of stirring around in my brain for a little bit, is like making some sort of track system. So like a track on the ceiling where I have the camera on an arm that's counterweighted, so I can just kind of move it around, leave it somewhere, and it'll just stay in that spot. Yeah,
so
that'd be amazing.
I've been kind of thinking about that one for a while now.
And then to throw it back to your electronic Legos from the beginning, just put some little Lego gears on it and just have it like slowly going back and forth to make it
exactly. Yeah, right. There's all these like really expensive like camera slider setups and everything, but why you don't need that stuff. You can DIY something pretty easily.
Totally, yeah. Spend like $3,000 or just spend a couple bucks and figure it out yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So what are the projects you've got like coming next? You've already mentioned it sounds like the coffee table that you're going to be working on, but there are other bigger ones that you're excited about working on this year? Or?
I kind of take it like I kind of look forward like a couple projects. So I have that coffee table I was talking about. I have one coming up where I'm working with. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the brand, but Cutsall. They make those like really cool grinding discs.
Totally. Yeah.
So I want to use one of those discs in order to create like fake live edge wood. So I'm going to make like a table that's where I like hand carve the live edge into it. So it's a matter of like finding the right pieces of wood that'll look realistic once they're carved. And so that's coming up. That's going to be probably a coffee table. Actually, no, I might do that as an end table for my living room. I would have to take a look at my little like video to-do list, and then I'm just working on a lot of stuff around the house. Like I'm doing like how to paint, how to caulk, how to resurface tile, and then also redo your grout lines, fix any grouting mistakes. I'm trying to take some of those more contractory things I know and share those with people because they're stuck at home right now.
Yeah, I will totally watch that. I'm horrible with anything around the house. We still have like a hole in my daughter's nursery's ceiling from when she was born 2 years ago, like where the ceiling fan went in. I'm like, I don't really want to fix that. But that stuff is. Do you
all those home things are so easy to put off. And if you look around my house, it's like I have all the skills, I have all the tools necessary to fix these things, and they still sit for years and years. So it's like I'm trying to really embrace this time at home and be productive with it, and I hope other people are too.
Do you find that you have different folks that will interact with you if you're doing more of the contract stuff versus the furniture stuff, or you kind of have the same audience?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I find the contracting stuff I do, and also you talked earlier about how I've talked a little bit about photography on my page. I find that stuff it resonates with some people, but it's definitely not my core demographic. So I usually find engagement on that type of stuff is a little bit lower, but I'm hoping, just because, everybody's stuck at home, we all have these things piled up around the house, I'm hoping that people will respond a little bit better to these. So we'll see. It's a little bit of an experiment on my part, but yeah, definitely the core of my audience is like, it's there for woodworking and building.
Yeah. So you mentioned Kutzall, and so in terms of sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, did you meet them at WorkbenchCon? Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I met them very briefly at WorkbenchCon, but really just enough to get like their card.
Got it.
I talked to the guy for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, got his card, and then I went home. I was like, I sat down and I thought, how can I use this product in an interesting way, or what, at least I think it's an interesting way. And then I went back to them with a fleshed out game plan. I said, hey, I'd love to use your product to do this project. And I kind of described it. And I said, if you're willing to send me the tools necessary to do it, then I will gladly tag you in the post. And I will, say that I used your product to accomplish this.
So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's kind of my, whenever I'm thinking about working with a brand, I always go to them with a project in mind. Right. I don't say, hey, send me free stuff because I'm, a nice guy. Right. I say, here's the creative use I see for your product. And, if you're willing to work with me on it, then I will let people know that.
Yeah. Yeah. That strategy always seems like it works a little better. But so speaking of WorkbenchCon, then if people aren't familiar with WorkbenchCon, a really cool conference for people that make as well as make content online. And it was just it was February, right? Just a couple months ago down here in Atlanta. And that was your first time going?
That was my first time, yeah.
So we talked about you kind of finding the woodworking community, but then I feel like a subset of that is like the content creator woodworking community. Mm-hmm. Like, was that what was that experience like meeting those people like in person, and like was it what you expected?
Yeah, well, so I talked a little bit earlier about how I feel like some of my Instagram friends are like real life friends. Like I have very close relationships with them, and a lot of what was so great about WorkbenchCon was going and meeting those people and actually meeting them face to face and being like, oh, you're not just you're not a fake person. Like you don't put on a personality when you're on Instagram. Like that's actually you that I've been interacting with, and so it was really nice to get to know people that much better. But you're right, there's definitely a subset of people who are woodworkers, and then a subset who are woodworkers but also content creators at heart. And so you can kind of tell there's a lot more intentionality to it when people are like content creators as well. They take time to set up their photos. They take time to share individual steps. It's not like, hey, I made this thing. Yeah. Here's the picture of it. And then I won't say anything for a month. So and by the way, some of the best woodworkers I know online are people like that, where they'll just take a photo of something they've done and then they won't post again for another month while they're working on their next masterpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely two different streams you can kind of slot into. And, not everybody has this weird narcissistic trait where they want everybody to see everything they made, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I admire those people.
Yeah. So are you approaching things differently now because of that conference and kind of that community, or is it still kind of the same strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's kind of the same strategy, but I've modified it based on the things I've learned. I got to meet a lot of people who are way, way bigger than I am, and kind of pick their brains about it and learn things from them. And I also got to meet a lot of people who are at the same size as me, who know a ton of stuff that I don't know. So, I'd be lying if I didn't say I picked up stuff from people who are smaller than me too. I guess it doesn't really matter the size of your account. You can still have a lot of knowledge. So yeah, it was good to talk to a group of people who were so focused on being content creators as well as woodworkers. It's a really interesting dynamic. It was great to have all those people in one place. I feel like I learned a lot from everybody there.
Yeah, it's cool. I know a lot of people that have gone, and then like that next year, it feels like there's a lot of growth that happens and a lot of cool stuff. That's
totally. I wish I went years ago to be. I would have been so far ahead if I had gone and learned all the things I learned this year. If I had learned those 2 years ago, it would have been such a huge help for me. Some of it I just had to kind of figure out on my own, but there's a lot of shortcuts there if you know the right people to talk to.
Yeah. Man, but I bet this time next year or the next time WorkbenchCon rolls around, your follower counts will be quite a bit bigger, because it's always fun to see people that like the stuff they make is really good, just people don't know yet, and it's like once it catches a little bit, then they just take off. And I feel like you're totally in that spot because your stuff is just so cool.
Thank you, man. That's very kind of you to say. I'm, fingers crossed. I hope you're right. It's
if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I read that's what I think of.
It's funny, a couple of people at WorkbenchCon had actually said to me, like, "Oh, like you've like really blown up in the last little while," and it's like it's interesting to have an outsider's perspective on it, because for me, I feel like it's been like a slow burn, like a slow accumulation. Because I'm living it, right?
Right.
Whereas other people, they might look at my profile once every 6 months or something like that and see that the follower count has jumped. But for me, it's like, oh, one day I had 10 people, one day I had 25. It doesn't seem like a huge explosion.
Yeah. But I mean, you said you've been posting since 2017, so it isn't like you just started the other day.
No, yeah, so that's interesting, because I didn't actually, when I first started, I kind of thought my blog was going to be the big thing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I was way off base there. So the blog actually probably goes further back than Instagram does. And then I had a conversation with a friend of mine who works in public relations, and she was just kind of like, what are you doing? You need to be on Instagram. You need to be focusing your efforts there. So that's that. There was kind of a course correction that came probably about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Which still is, I mean, it isn't like you just started the other day and then you've had all this success. And then you've got, what people don't see is like the years and years of experience, like actually making things for a living and documenting it and doing all that.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of like back training that goes into like all the familiarity with the tools and like, all that stuff there's a lot that goes into it. And just the hours to produce, like, I don't know how long your average YouTube video takes to make, but I'm still like 50, 60 hours into editing a 15-minute video. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. You're like, I just want to build something again. I'm tired of sitting in front of the computer. But.
I know. It's hard to balance. Like, I don't know if you have this, but I'll like sit down and I'll like edit something and I'll want to go build something, but I know if I stop editing and go build something, that video might not ever get finished. I might not ever come back to it because I might be on to the next thing. So I'm trying to be like laser focused, like one project, one edited video, one project, one edited video.
Yeah. And especially with you, because it feels like you enjoy the editing piece just because you add so much to it. So I do too. And so it is hard to like I could add more to the edit. Like this is fun, but like also need to build things because that's fun too. So it's hard to balance
Exactly. At a certain point, you have to say, like, okay, there's an expression, done is better than perfect, right? And you have to say, like, yeah, I could keep refining this, but I do need to be out there, building new things for my own sanity and just to keep the content kind of, you got to keep it coming.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I appreciate you jumping on and chatting.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Totally. It was definitely a blast. For people that haven't checked your stuff out already, is it Zac Builds on Instagram and YouTube? Is that where you send them?
Yeah, it's kind of like Zac. If you type in Zac Builds in basically any social media, you'll find something about me. But yeah, Zac Builds on YouTube is the one I'm really trying to focus on right now. I'm kind of putting my heart and soul into that. So yeah, if people want to check me out, I think that would be the place to do it. That's kind of where I see my long-term trajectory. It's making more long-form content on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure to include links for that. But man, thank you so much for jumping on and chatting. It was a blast.
Yeah, this is a great time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.